Hey Susan, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm feeling great. I'm having a good time. Thank you for sitting with me to talk about just everything. But before we get started, I don't know if they warned you. I don't know if they told you. I don't know what happens. But we do this thing because we're so slobberingly grateful for any interview we get, especially a person of your caliber. We do this thing called the over the top intro. Can we do that for you? Can we butter your bread, talk good about you before this interview even starts
God,
off?
I want that. Yeah.
But let's get into it. My next guest is a writer, radio personality, the co-host of The Ride on KPCCFM. In short, she is a living, breathing, walking revolutionary who stays right next door. And, quiet as kept, she's a closet foodie. We'll get into that in later. But what we are here to talk about today is 40 Watts from Nowhere making its premiere at the Slamdance Film Festival February 20th through the 26th. And then this project will be available virtually on slamdancechannel.com from February 24th through March 7th. Susan Carpenter, welcome to the podcast.
And wow, that is an amazing intro. Thank you very much. And thank you for having me.
Man, I feel so energized just talking to you and after watching this film because, granted, I was growing up, I grew up in the late 1900s. I don't know if you know this. And back then, before the internet and before everything was whatever it is now, radio was king. And it was a thing where finding something that you liked or finding something that resonated with you that didn't exactly seem pushed down your throat, if that makes sense.
It does.
It was lifeblood. It was something you needed. And after watching your film, I see that was a lot of what you were going through at that time.
Yeah. I mean, if you tuned into the radio in the 1990s, there was a lot of crap.
Yeah,
Say, like there was a lot of tuning around and not like so many stations and nothing to listen to, right? So it just felt like you could tune into the classic rock station and hear Led Zeppelin for the millionth time. You could tune into the alternative rock station. You could hear Nirvana for the 10 millionth time. Like, but where there was so much music and you knew that there was great music because you went out to the clubs and you were hearing it. You went to the record store and you were hearing it and you were buying it, but you didn't have access to it on the airwaves. At least that's how it felt. There was college radio, but when I first started my pirate radio station, the college radio that I could tune into went off the air at 6 p.m. every night. Well, that's when I was home from work. Like I wanted to be able to listen to the music that I liked at night, because I didn't have a television. I just liked tuning into the radio and doing my thing.
makes sense.
That's where it came from. And then I had reached out to a bunch of record labels. There was what I had heard about, and then there was the stuff that was coming down the pike. And so record labels just started giving me all this stuff. And there's something super exciting about getting all these manila envelopes and you're ripping it open. And these are records that aren't yet out. And you're previewing them and you're like, oh my God, I love it. That was exactly what I wanted other people to feel when they tuned into the radio station. So the stuff that I was finding through the mail that the independent labels were giving me, I was playing, and I think other people were digging that too.
No, and that makes sense. And it really hits me on a personal level because this podcast was I used to look at it like adult playtime. I was when I first started, it was just me and my friends. We're getting older. We have responsibilities. We have wife, kids, and all the other good stuff. However, we needed at least 1 hour a week to tell dick and fart jokes that makes us laugh. And then as this goes on, we start jumping into your vibe. We start learning about different people. We start interviewing people. We start finding projects and things that's not mainstream. It just isn't. So yeah, I totally get that vibe. So I'm kind of like at the forefront of this weird, I don't know, hike of I always call it pop culture, but it's like a counterculture to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I see you guys did it, um, it it's awesome. But one of the cool things about your story is you have been telling this story in different mediums over the years. If you think about it, I mean, you had a book. Why was it so important to tell this story via film this time around?
I never intended to make a movie. The whole reason I wrote the book, the station was on the air from 1995 to 1998.
Hmm.
I wrote an article about the radio station back when it was going on in 1997, and that article got sold to turn it into a book. So I wrote this book in like 2000. It came out in 2003, and then I thought that was it. Like the whole reason I wanted to write the book was to tell this story, get it out there, and I thought that was the end of it. It is not the end of it. I mean, ever since that book came out, I've been hearing from different people who have wanted to turn it into a movie. It's been optioned several times. It's never been turned into a movie. A few years ago, some people found that book and turned it into an experiential play. It was through this experiential play that I brought together a bunch of the old DJs. And one of them said, hey, I have all this old footage at the station. I'll give it to you. Do you want to just look at it? So when I looked at it, he didn't just have like an hour or two of random footage. He had 12 hours of
Mm.
footage that was in the station, like riding on the back of my motorcycle, shooting in the neighborhood, going to live shows, street parties, all this stuff. And when he started rolling with this using a mini DV camera at the time, which was really kind of rare for anybody to have back in 1998, it just so happened that we were at our peak and then we got busted. And so he got like the whole story. And when I saw that, that's why I thought I should make the documentary. And he had started shooting because he thought it was going to make a documentary back in 1998. And I'm happy that he didn't for a few different reasons. Like nobody would have cared. Like if you put it out there, like everybody put it out back then, like everybody knows this. We're all living this, right? Now, 30 years later, people are like, say what? This is what the 90s were like,
Makes
So I
sense.
think the timing is right. And for me, it was sort of a creative challenge. Um, so that's how it happened. It wasn't that I felt super strongly. The story had been out there, and it sounds like I'm just like a one-trick pony. Like, oh, there she is again talking about that pirate radio station. Like I have
No.
a full life, but this story, people continue to be interested in it.
Okay. Speaking of creative challenges, that leads into my next question. Why do you name
Okay.
all your radio stations after sandwiches? I just got to know.
Well, first of all, I love sandwiches. And
Clearly.
when I was going to name the station, other people who had bar radio stations, they didn't use like the FCC naming convention, which is a letter followed by three other letters. On the West Coast, the stations start with K. On the East Coast, they start with W. But, when you have like those three letters to play with, for some reason, the first thing that popped into my mind was peanut butter and jelly, PBJ. I thought it was super cute. So I named my station KPBJ. That was the one that I operated up in San Francisco, which was the first one. And then I realized through operating the station that when you say PBJ, people do not understand what it is that you're saying. It's a like on mic, like through like this signal, like nobody understands that. And then when I came down to LA, I was like, perfect chance to rebrand another sandwich. Happens to be my favorite sandwich, bacon, lettuce, and tomato, BLT. So KBLT. That's what it turned into.
All right, I gotta ask, mainly because when you do stuff like this, you have done it. You was very successful. KBLT, was 4 years. Was it? It lasted for about 4 years. Now, it was 4 years of straight up running from the FCC.
You
Uh,
sound like I was just like they were lurking around the corner, like revving their engines. No, it wasn't that extreme.
okay, I'm curious because is it something where it was like it was a real threat, but did you have it in the back of your mind? And this nameless, faceless organization, because you got to think, again, grew up late 1900s. The FCC was like for real, but no one knew what they did. You had the Stern stuff. You had obviously you documented it as well as you did the case at Berkeley. And then right around the corner, you had the whole Napster experience. And there are these people who do this, and not one person can, no one really got in trouble, but the threat was always there. Is that in your mind when operating and creating a pirate radio station? Or is that just kind of like, I will deal with it when we deal with it?
Well, I would say that before I started the radio station, I was somebody who would have characterized myself as a good girl,
Mm,
somebody who followed the rules, did what was expected. And the reason I decided to stop being that person is because it wasn't making me happy, you know? And who are these rules? Who's making these rules anyways, you know? So going up against the FCC, it was terrifying to somebody like me at that time. I really did think that they were just like waiting in their van with their little triangulator gizmo, like just ready to like pounce any moment. And I would sit around outside, you know, looking for white vans. And of course you see white vans everywhere when you do that, but no, they weren't there. I mean, I feel like, you know, the biggest threat was the fine. You had heard that they could put you in jail. They could confiscate your equipment. There were some stations that were taken out with battering rams, you know, but that was really the exception. So you were asking if I was constantly living in fear. I was fearful, but it wasn't paralyzing because obviously I was able to keep doing this, you know?
okay. So I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I kind of want to touch on this again. It almost seems like every 20 years you have to retouch on this subject of owning a pirate radio station. That's just, if you go by your actual life, the book, and now the movie, every 20 years or so, you just go, all right, hey, let's talk about it again. I guess what I'm getting at is this. Is it easier coming back to relive these moments, because it looks like you guys were having a ton of fun and you brought back some of the DJs, or is it just kind of like, yeah, that's the thing I got to do every 20 years?
No, I mean, I feel like you are seeing like this slice of my life and me talking about it with you right now. And it probably seems like this is all consuming. I have a very full life, just generally, that isn't all about the pirate radio station. It's enjoyable to talk about. I hope that this isn't the one thing that defines me, although it probably will be, you know, just because it's this kooky story that people continue to be attracted to. But yeah, I don't mind it.
Hey,
And you're right, it's fun. It's fun to go back there.
that's what I'm getting at. Okay, as a guy who struggles with this at weekly, since I do this, if for nothing else, I am podcast guy. So in my friends or my family, it comes up. However, it is, I don't know, there is a bright side. You can shut the door on, especially my kid. You can shut the door. Hey, dad was cool. Dad was cool. Look, I have evidence to show I was cool. I don't know if you have played that game before, Susan,
I have always been cool.
but that's what I'm getting at. Okay, the younger generation. I know you're cool. I saw the movie, but what I'm getting at is the younger generation always thinks they're something else. And to my son, I am dad. There is
Hmm.
nothing more or less. I am boring. I am dad. So in the same vein as I'm talking to you, a person who revolutionized California radio, and I'm being generous,
Yes, you are.
but you get what I'm saying, just how we do it. And quite honestly, you're kind of an inspiration to myself, because this started off as an audio podcast under the same guidelines that you have done way back when, well, in the mid 90s. However,
Hmm.
I got an 11-year-old in another room who's like, yeah, that's still the same guy who eats charcuterie boards and fall asleep in the middle of Lions games. So you get what I'm saying.
Well, I do. I mean, for me, No, I understand what you're saying in a work context because I'm not somebody who has any tattoos. I'm not somebody who cares about like what it is that I wear. So I feel like when I go into my office, people look at me and they have no idea that I did this. They think that they're super cool based on what it is, their lives that they're living. So I don't try to present as that, as having done that. I much prefer to have done it, but not look like I did it. You know what I mean? Like I like to be
Right.
a little bit more stealth that way. But my kid, who's older than yours, he's 22, he's in college. Um, he, I think he's always had a different perspective on me because I was a motorcycle critic after I ran the radio station. And so he grew up like from the time he was in diapers, like a different motorcycle in my driveway, seeing me like and testing Ferrari. Like I was a motorcycle and a car critic like for his whole life. So for him, he doesn't think that I'm the way that I think that young people who see me on the street think of me. You know what I
Right.
mean?
That's awesome.
Yeah. So but he's one person in my life. And but I like the fact that people think that I'm boring now just based on the way that I look. I think that's way better. Then you can sort of surprise them
Has that
if they
happened?
ask the question, you know?
Has that happened where someone walked past you, they may have read the book or they've seen this movie or heard about it or and the internet is all encompassing and read an article is like, wait, whoa, whoa, whoa. Susan Carp, you? Does that come up?
I feel like, yeah, but very like I do not bring it up. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Nobody's seen the movie because it hasn't had its premiere yet,
Well,
except
yeah,
but it's going to be premiering in 2 weeks at Slamdance. So I don't have that experience of people like, oh, I heard about that movie or oh, and the book came out forever ago. So it's just like I've yeah, it's kind of ancient history unless you like if you know, you know, right? But if you
right.
don't, then it's gonna maybe come up, but maybe not, you
The,
know?
the reason
So
I say that is not to spoil this movie. The reason I bring up these topics about our kids and how people look at you and stuff like that is because it made you way more successful and able to do this for 4 years in Southern California because it was non-assuming. It was a very non-assuming house. It was apartment. It was a very non-assuming anything. Yes, you may have, and the amount of characters, crazy characters that may have went into these places or went into your place, and you don't think twice about it, but because of the way it looks, it was like hidden in plain sight the whole time.
it really was. It's funny that you talk about like this cast of characters because when you see the movie, it really does feel like these people were cast. And this is just how it legitimately was, like a neighbor that has a pet pig, like my neighbor was also a magician, like rock stars, just different types of people. Um, and I remember when the book came out and it was reviewed in Publishers Weekly, one of the criticisms of the book, and I think was like even in the first paragraph or something, was like, it reads like she was trying to cast characters out of central casting. And I was like, those are who they were, like these were the actual people. Like this was what the 90s legitimately were, you
Right.
know? So
It
yeah.
was it was a very special time, the 90s. It was where all cultures in a way was all celebrated. And this kind of speaks to your radio station, KBLT. Everyone had a different thing. But for 2 hours, you got a chance to show your thing on this radio station that you shouldn't be listening to in the first place. And you get this, and this the weird gumbo of people turns into whatever it was at the time. It was a perfect counterculture for would have been Capital, would have been at the time K Rock, would have been time of just and I feel bad saying this, but I'm just gonna say it. The Gwen Stefani's of the world. And I really like Gwen Stefani, but I'm just using her as an example. And it was like, hey guys, there's so much more out there, and this is it. and for 2 hours at a time, you will have that DJ hold your hand through whatever was going through their mind at that time and teach you something new. Hopefully, you learn something new. Did I
Yeah,
nail it?
turned out some amazing music that you never even knew existed, and that was the whole reason I even started the radio station is because I wanted to I want to hear something good. Like I grew up in the Midwest and I, took piano lessons and violin lessons for 10 years, loved listening to the radio. And then I got to college and that was when I found out that what I was hearing on the radio, like that was the first time I got an inkling, like, oh, there's more, like I
Right.
went to school in the Midwest in the 90s and like the Replacements and Husker Du, like all these Midwest, like Violent Femmes, all these local kind of I don't even know what genre you would call. I guess it's like early alternative. It wasn't 90s alternative. It was like mid to
I'm
eight.
with you.
So, yeah. I
Alternative,
mean,
but before Sky.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good way of putting it.
Again, late 1900s, right here.
But yeah, there's just so much out there. And then, like you said, like on the radio station, every DJ had their own perspective. They had their own record collections. They would come in and they would just do their thing, you know?
Now, the big curiosity with me is this is still operating out of your house. So how was that? Where it's just like, yeah, here's weird guy number 3. Hey, I gotta get some sleep. I got work tomorrow. See you tomorrow.
Not
Or
great. I
did
mean,
you?
I don't know why I found it tolerable, but okay, here's my theory. You
Mm-hmm.
know that frog in boiling water analogy? Like the frog gets put into the water and it's like really like a lukewarm, right? And then
Right.
as it's like then it boils and then it only realizes that it's boiling like when it's too late, right? So my station started out really small. It was just a couple hours every night. Then as it was building out,
Mm-hmm.
it started like 6 to 8 or 8 to 10, 10 to midnight, 4 hours a night. Then I started building it out like 6 to 8 p.m., 4 to 6 p.m., from noon to midnight, basically. Then eventually the demand was so great that it became 24 hours, but that wasn't instant. So I sort of just accepted that this is what I had set in motion. There were, of course, times where it drove me bonkers that there were people in my house constantly. And like the radio station was at one end of a hallway and the bathroom was on the hallway. So if I needed to take a shower, I was I was coming in and out like in a robe, like with strangers who were like DJing down the hall. That wasn't great. Or trying to sleep. I'm a very light sleeper. If people decided to just like have a party down the hall at 2 o'clock in the morning, not great. But I think I was just committed to what I had created. And so you just sort of suck it up, you know?
Well, I get it, and I understand. We're artists, so you kind of quote suffer for your art, I guess. Um, but what do you want people to take away from this film? It's premiering at Slamdance. I'm very curious. What do you want? I took out a lot, but what do you want the viewer to take from this project?
I want people to have an experience and I want them to know what it was like to live in the 90s, live this crazy lifestyle for 90 minutes with me, feel the highs, feel the lows. And at the end, I want them to feel empowered, which is, I feel like what you felt when you left
Yeah,
there.
a little bit because you took this thing and you made everyone's favorite thing. Now I'm wording my words very carefully, not to spoil this. You made someone's favorite thing, and then unfortunately you had to take it away. But we all remember that very important time of our life because that adolescence, or maybe it was you learned something new, or you found new DJs, or you found it just a new ideal or different perspective. So yeah, it was pretty dope. Now I will say this: it was 90 minutes. You got 12 hours of footage. What was left on the cutting room floor? What was something that you wish you could have had more time to talk about a little bit more? that for whatever reason just wasn't in the film?
We had a whole part cut because after we got busted, we did this whole project where we called ourselves the Jerky Girls, and it was the three of us. It was me and two of the other DJs with huge colored wigs and crinoline skirts and like candy boxes, and we would go out to the clubs and we would get signatures thinking that we could petition the FCC to let us stay on the air. So we have some of that footage. We have some footage of, DJing at people's houses. Um, what else do we have? Those are probably the things that I would have liked to include, but it just for the sake of streamlining the story, we didn't need to like belabor the point that we had been busted. So that got taken out.
Okay. Well, Susan, this has been an awesome time. I know I'm up against it. I'm looking at the clock right now, and I want to be fair to anyone else who's right after me, but this has just been such a great talk. Great movie, great everything. I meant what I said earlier. You are a walking, living, breathing revolutionary. And if you just are, like there are people who you don't know how many strings you may have loosened, and you created guys and gals like myself. You created people like me. Now, what you would have done in the internet age, Lord only knows. However,
I wouldn't be you. Like you have the gift of gab. Like you are so fun to talk to. Like, yeah,
all
I
right,
don't have
well,
that. I don't have that.
what I'm getting at is if it wasn't for people like you, people like me wouldn't be here. So I'm very thankful just to talk with you. I saw what you have done, and I know you have changed a few minds. Well, at least in 20 years worth of time, you've changed some minds somewhere. So, well, give or take, it's a little bit more than 20 at this point, but you get what I'm saying.
I do.
Thank you so much for just giving me a little bit of time, being on my podcast. You're awesome, and you're welcome back anytime.
It's really been so much fun talking to you. Seriously. I would love to come back.
The door's open whenever you want, Susan. Have a
All
great
right. Bye.
one. Bye.